items, but let's start off with planning. Having an operational guide of how your facility operates typically will lead to less accidents or things happening outside of your normal operation. So having a plan is a great idea. Having an emergency plan and an evacuation plan for yourself, your family, and any of your employees, as this presentation is for all aspects of licenses under the Cannabis Control Board. It's very important to plan ahead for something that may happen in the future. Having proper equipment, we're going to talk about that extensively today. And this goes from everything from the types of coatings on your walls to light fixtures to extension cord use and lighting equipment and carbon dioxide delivery methods. Having proper equipment is really, really important. And talking specifically on the fire safety side, making sure that you have the proper fire extinguishers and proper smoke and carbon monoxide detection for people who have these facilities within your homes is a really, really important item. Evaluate your own process. There's nobody that's going to know your facility or your establishment better than you. So taking an inner look at your facility and what some of the hazards may be that have been created over time, which happens to all of us. And I'll use some examples today. Evaluate your planning. So once you have a plan, don't just leave your plan in place. Evaluate that plan as people enter into your life or your business, and evaluate it with those people so that they're aware of your planning also. Just because you've been doing something does not mean that it's safe. And one of the most common things that we hear at the Division of Fire Safety is we've been doing it this way for 20 years. And in my world, we say, well, that's really, really lucky if we've identified a risk or a hazard associated with something. And we'll see some pictures of things like that today that, just because it may work or serve a purpose does not mean that it's safe. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So I have some real world slides and pictures as we go through this presentation today. And by no means are there any identifying markings, and these are just general pictures that have been taken throughout time, and some come from the internet. That is my disclaimer. But as you'll see in this picture, there's a lot of items that are being utilized well outside of their designed use. We have extension cords, we have timers for fans, we have fans in an enclosed area being powered by an extension cord. And this is really a good example of, should we take a step back and see if we can neaten this up, get some permanent electrical to that space, and utilize equipment in accordance with the manufacturer's design. Throughout the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of equipment that is designed for, say, a residential use, like moving air through a building, being utilized well outside of its design. And that does cause risk and hazards, especially if we're trying to control an environment with such small parameters that we create a very healthy growing facility for our plants. You can go to the next slide, that'd be great. When I spoke about things changing throughout time, we're all humans and we do things of convenience. And this is a really, really good example of where something has been convenient and become a storage area for a bunch of household items. And inside of that box is a grow operation. And you'll see that there's a lot of items that are placed within close proximity to that location. And you'll see the ducting or the venting that is leaving that. It comes up and it was probably in somebody's way, so they bent it and tossed it over the top of the appliance. Something to consider is to always read the manufacturer's instructions and directions when we're utilizing design pieces of equipment, because in this case, the manufacturer would say that duct should be as straight as possible because every turn that it takes creates friction in that airline and it won't move air as regularly as it should. And in this case, I'm pretty sure that that little tent is not designed to hold weight on top of it. So the more things you add to the top, the more risk you're putting your little plants in the inside. Um, but think about this in different scales, right? I took a very small scale here as an example, but you could scale this up to almost anything that we do as humans. We do things that are convenient for us. And again, I want to reemphasize that looking at your operations to see how many convenient things that you have that you can change to make your facility safer is a really good idea. Thank you. Ingenuity is the industry standard, and we have seen this time and time again. Not just in the cannabis industry, as a fire marshal as a whole. We see a lot of creativeness brought into a lot of different industries. There's issues sometimes with that, where the $10 easy do-it-yourself green grow light maybe utilizing a fixture that's not designed for that light. There's a pie tin that is being utilized as a light diffuser in this picture. And I'm just going to focus on this one little picture as an example to give you an idea of what would happen. The pie tin absorbs heat and then disperses it. So that heat has to go somewhere from that space. And if it goes to a light fixture that's holding the light bulb that's not designed for that, it will break it down over time. So today, that light fixture looks great and it was an easy $10 hack. But over time, that light fixture is probably going to, the plastics will probably break down in that light fixture and create a hazard within that one little item. So again, looking at your operations and what you've created to get your operations going and seeing if there's items that can be utilized that may be safer for your operation or should be a constantly evaluated item for you as an industry. Go to the next slide. Thanks. Here's another really, really good example. Um, in this picture that you're all seeing, there's a light fixture with dual bulbs. It does look like a porcelain holder for the light bulbs or a fixture for the light bulbs, but you'll see that they used a piece of tin as a light diffuser to reflect the light. And if you look just above that, there's two different types of chain holding it up. And there's what we call in my industry, a flying splice. So instead of using an electrical box or an approved fitting or an approved plug, somebody has taken a wire, cut the end off of each end, connected them, spliced them, and used a piece of tape to hold it in place. Um, and you'll see that this is obviously a structure that somebody built within their home because there's a 2x4 superstructure holding that light fixture up and in place. All of these things are really good examples of ingenuity that probably are not the safest thing in the world and should be evaluated for a safer method of operation. Flying splices are very, very dangerous because that splice is not protected within a box. So if that anything bumps into that piece of wire or every time somebody hits that light fixture, that physical connection where the wire nut is above the light fixture actually will move. And it is not designed for that. If you think about where wire nuts live in your everyday house, they live inside of a wall and inside of a box that secures them. So they're not ever designed to move or to take those physical damages that this environment would create. Thank you. Here's some really good examples of scaling up that same operation because guess what? It worked great and it was a cheap fix, so we scaled it up. Um, Again, we're dealing with the same risks and hazards that were associated with the previous pictures, except this time we've introduced a bunch of combustible materials within close proximity to that. If you look on each end of the light fixtures, you'll see that they're being held up by some really big books. I wonder if somebody got a deal on them. But the reality is this is a perfect scenario and situation of what should be evaluated by you if you have scenarios similar to this. this is a good picture because there's a lot of things going on the right-hand side, as you face the picture. There's the light fixtures, there's the home-built housings, there's the extension cords on the right-hand side into a power strip, and we're gonna talk about electrical a lot in a little bit, but there's plastic sheathing that have been introduced to the floor, which, when it does combust, it puts off a lot of very bad poisons, as incomplete, products of combustion. And like we've discussed, the books. Uh, if we look to the bottom left-hand side, you're gonna see, an indoor grow. It is a tent, type grow that somebody purchased, but they're utilizing light fixtures that were really designed for a job site. So somebody went to Home Depot, they bought, or a Lowe's or a big box store, and they, bought a string of lights, and they put their grow lights in there and, on some timers, and they're also being fed by an extension cord. A really big item is, extension cords are not designed for permanent use. In no scenario should an extension cord become your permanent power supply. They're not designed to take physical damage over time. And as they do receive physical damage, they degrade. So the extension cords will actually break down over time and create additional risks and hazards. One last thing on extension cords is extension cords are only designed to draw so much power through them. So if you have lots of lights that have a large draw of power, even some LEDs, because remember, LEDs all have transformers in them, that power use will degrade that extension cord over time also. So power strips, if they're designed for the use and they're not overloaded, then they're appropriate. But we don't hook power strips into other power strips, and we don't utilize extension cords for long periods of time. Here's some really some good examples of equipment that's been utilized in the industry that's really just not designed for that use. You'll see on the bottom right-hand side that was a little fan that somebody was utilizing to get some air movement inside of a small grow operation. Well, that's first, it takes a different kind of power, a different voltage than your household power. Second, it's really not designed to be in the environment that's healthy for your plant to grow. And that's way outside of its designed use. In the top right-hand picture, you're gonna notice that there's a toilet in that grow room because somebody took their bathroom and turned it into a nice little grow area. A few things about that picture, you'll see that the walls have been coated. The walls have been coated with a product to assist in the growing operation. In this case, it looks like a foil-based product. A very important item is to make sure that you're purchasing appropriate products for your wall coverings and that you're creating an environment that's not just healthy for your plants, but healthy for you as an individual. In this case, anytime that there's a restroom fixture, there's a risk of methane coming back out that toilet, especially if it's not used over time. So when somebody created this room, what they really did is enclosed all of the things that would naturally vent and then take away the protections that we normally use for those by keeping water in them. So if you leave a toilet not used for a long period of time or a sink, the traps that are within those appliances will dry up and allow gases to come back up those pipes. So these are a lot of things that people don't think about every day. And, again, they don't happen immediately. So as humans, we don't see that as a significant risk, but over time, it does create risks and hazards. And on the left-hand side, I'm not really sure what type of plant that is that's growing, but it is an indoor grow. But you'll see on the left-hand side, there's some extension cords that are being propped up. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see a fan that's being supported by its electrical cord. And those are all things that we really don't want to see. We want to see appropriate fixtures being utilized that can be supported without the electrical cord, unless it's designed that way. And there's very few items that are designed to be supported by their power cord. And on the bottom left-hand side, this is a fan, believe it or not. I have one of these in my home. I have a 17-year-old, but this is missing about half of its parts. So somebody took about half of its parts off, because it is a really great little fan. But the stand that supports that is now missing. And the guard that was over the front of it is also now missing. So we've created some risks and hazards by finding an item that worked for our immediate need. And I am a human. I'm going to tell you that I have done many things in my life to get a job done, with the knowledge that I'm gonna have to make this right over time. And if you have an emergency situation and you have to utilize something, that's what you have to do. But what you should do is evaluate how you can make that process better, because these items that I'm showing you as an example all come with risk. Here is some more ingenuity. So somebody really wanted to disguise their grow operation. And I'm going to say the equipment that's within this armoire is actually really nice equipment. The light and the fan are integral. The air movement and the dehumidification and the power supply all really look like they can do a really fantastic job. The problem is I bet you that armoire was never designed to have those moisture levels, support that type of equipment, have the change in environment over time, because it's wood and it's a confined space. So you add moisture, you remove moisture, you add moisture, you remove moisture. Over time, that wood is absolutely not going to hold up. But on top of that, somebody added probably 50 or 60 pounds worth of equipment to hang off of the top of the armoire. Um, Ingenuity, this picture gets an A+, but for safety, it does not. You have to remember that any piece of equipment that you utilize in a confined space that's going to utilize electricity is going to generate some form of heat. So if we enclose a bunch of lights into a really small room, that room is going to get very warm just from those lights. And removing that heat in an appropriate way is a really important item. Here is a picture of, and it's a drawn picture, and I picked this out on purpose because it really does illustrate the proper use of almost every single piece of equipment that we see utilized in the industry. On the right-hand side, we see a carbon dioxide tank. Going back, we see proper lighting fixtures and wiring methods. Going to proper spacing, creating safe aisleways and passages around our plants, and proper hanging of the light fixtures from a structure, not from something that we built at home. Excuse me. Air movement and air removal for proper air exchanges in a confined space. There's two items that really aren't designed for this room in this room. On the left-hand side, you'll see a heater. That's a portable heater. And most portable heaters are designed for specific square footage. They're designed for residential use only. And they're also only listed, and the manufacturer's directions will say in them that they should be monitored when they're in use. So what are the odds that somebody babysits the plants while that heating appliance or portable heater is in use? I'd say it's pretty slim, because those plants take a little bit to grow. And then the fan. The fan could go either way. The fan could be for this use, but most residential design fans are not really intended for industrial use, meaning they're not designed to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's specific equipment that is available and out on the market that is designed for those uses. Thank you. Here's some additional examples. And I don't ever focus on the bad, but I do want to talk about some things. And on the top left-hand side, we see, do not enter pesticide has been applied. Every fungicide, herbicide, and pesticide will have requirements for documentation and use and available products that can be utilized. But following the manufacturer's directions in regards to how long to stay out of those areas, how to properly mark those areas when those products have been applied are all very, very important to me as a state fire marshal and to anybody that may be visiting your facility. And if there is an accident, we do want to let the fire department know before they get into these facilities that there's been an application of herbicides, fungicides, or pesticides because they don't act the same way as a plant burning would. So we at the Division of Fire Safety say that you should have signage outside of the entry door to the space where a product has been applied um, uh, to notify people that that product is there. One additional item on um, fungicides, herbicides, or pesticides is an SDS sheet should be kept any time that those products are on site. An SDS sheet is a safety data sheet, and they are available online or from the person that you purchased the product from. And in certain quantities and in certain facilities, they're actually required to be on site by law. So if you took a product and you Googled or utilized a search engine and said SDS sheet for that product, you can actually print them. They're all available. You can also go to any manufacturer's website for those products and pick them up. On the bottom left-hand side, you're going to see what we absolutely never want to see, and that's inappropriate disposal of products that are utilized in the growing of cannabis products. So disposing of products appropriately is very, very important. Making sure that you utilize your hazardous materials drop-off locations at transfer stations is a really good idea. And if you have a much larger scale chemical that needs to be disposed of, you can call multiple environmental companies to help with disposal of those products in a safe way. On the right-hand side, you're just going to see a very large grow. And in this picture, you'll see that they've used wood spans that are very, very big. And this was well outside of the Division of Fire Safety. This picture actually isn't in Vermont, but you want to make sure that your structure is going to be safe for your product and you and your employees that will be underneath it. In this case, that's probably a way too large of a span for a wood span without any structural supports. So evaluating how your buildings are being held up is a really, really important item in this industry. So we're going to go through these next slides kind of quickly um, because I just want to the extraction portion of the cannabis industry is kind of small in the state of Vermont, and I don't want to focus all of our important time on that, and I do want to get to everybody's questions. But appropriate storage and use of equipment and making sure that you have an engineer of record to help you design your process, equipment use and safety plan and safe operations are all really important items. As these extraction processes come through the Division of Fire Safety, we actually mandate all of those steps. An architect and an engineer of record would be part of that design, permit, and build out to ensure a safe level of operations. There's in this picture alone, there's probably 5 or 6 significant issues. We have a lot of mixed equipment and flammable products in a cabinet and out of the cabinet on the bottom left. We have products that are under pressure without appropriate safeguards. We have vacuum pumps. And we have some kind of a tank that somebody needed to keep a certain temperature. So they insulated it, used some duct tape, and then wrapped it in plastic and held the wrapper on with some plastic. So these are things that we don't want to see. We don't want to see a manufactured piece of equipment being altered outside of the design by the manufacturer because that removes certain aspects of safety from the equipment. Again, this is going to be an extraction type facility. You'll see in the rear left-hand side, it's a different view of that same operation. You'll see the wrap tank. But um, keeping combustible materials in your environment clean are really important. You'll see that there's a large amount of pieces of equipment that are still to be unpacked. And some of those pieces of equipment aren't even allowed in the same room as the extraction process. So having an appropriate layout and having that designer of record and the architects and engineers as part of your design team are really important. And this brings us down to a really small scale type of an manufacturing process, and utilizing equipment for its use is really, really important. So altering residential pieces of a cooking equipment to meet your needs for your specific use can create hazards that are not designed for that piece of equipment. Um, Reading the manufacturer's directions on how long the product can be utilized for, or how long it can sustain a certain temperature, or how far does it have to be from other combustible items, or where it should be located to be safely operated, are all important items when you start looking at this. In this picture, this is just a crock pot, and it appears to be some type of an oil. And utilizing that piece of equipment as it was designed is the safest thing that you can do. We've absolutely seen overloaded circuits from, say, a crock pot. When it heats up, it uses inline resistance heat, which is electricity. And if you put multiple crock pots on a single circuit in a house, you are going to overload that circuit. You'll either blow a fuse if you have an older electrical system, or you'll trip a breaker. And if you're tripping a breaker, you really should have an electrician come in and give you some additional circuits so that you can spread out your electrical load so that you're not tripping those. An example of ingenuity that we have seen is, instead of turning the crock pot on high, they turned multiple crock pots on low, thinking that it would be less of a demand. But when they all call for heat at the same time, it's the same demand. So to resolve that issue, utilizing different circuits, or having some additional circuits added is really good. Oh, here we have some dry ice being utilized, and I just want to talk about some risks associated with each one of these. Um, Dry ice obviously is very cold, and having cold injuries is something that we want to prevent. So, utilizing proper protective equipment, PPE, is really important, but also doing this in an environment that has enough air movement and air exchanges that you're not creating an unsafe environment is very, very important. So dry ice is made from carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is an asphyxiant, meaning it will displace oxygen over time if large amounts are utilized. And that could have a very large, very significant health effect on an individual utilizing it in a confined space. So knowing your product, knowing your process, evaluating your processes to find safer ways to complete them should be a constantly evolving item for you as an individual. Um, Here's some really large scale, very large pieces of equipment. And this slide is designed to talk about listed equipment and non-listed equipment. And this is a great place to do it. So there are some extraction pieces of equipment that are available that are UL listed, and that means that they've gone through a rigorous process to make sure that that equipment meets certain safety standards, and then it's received a UL listed label and sticker. Um, in Vermont, that's not the end all say all. We will allow equipment to be utilized, but it needs to be evaluated by either a nationally recognized testing authority or by an engineer of record that says this process is going to be safe. I've evaluated the equipment, the process, and its use. So we do have additional methods because the vast majority of products that are utilized for extraction in this industry are not UL listed. So we utilize the engineer of record to evaluate those processes and products. But this goes all the way down to the small scale. So take the extraction out of the equation. If I'm looking at the light fixtures like we were looking at earlier, those are being utilized well outside of their UL listing. Everything from the light bulb, the light fixture, the housing, the shroud, those would all be well outside of any UL listing for that piece of equipment. So utilizing pieces of equipment as they're designed is important all the way up the scale of the industry. Um, This is an ethanol extraction unit. It kind of looks like a giant washing machine. And when I got to see it work, that's kind of what I associated it with. But utilizing equipment as it's designed and as the manufacturer has designed it to be utilized is absolutely important. Overloading or overutilizing equipment will take it outside of those safe parameters. And altering the equipment from its designed or manufactured use should only be completed with the manufacturer's permission or with an engineer of records approval in design and evaluation. Everything in my industry is designed to take something on the risk scale that is red and bring it to green. So what I like to focus on is showing what some of the issues are, but also how to reduce some of those risks. And what we've talked about today is evaluating your operations to reduce those risks and make those environments tools safer for you and the industry as a whole. This is a relatively fledgling industry in the state of Vermont. And there's going to be lots of new ideas that come about. Evaluating those new ideas, processes, equipment should be a constantly evolving item. So we're going to talk about some good things. Thank you. This is a really well thought out plan. And this was submitted to the Division of Fire Safety to evaluate for compliance. In this case, we worked with an architect and engineer of record and with some owners to excuse me, facilitate issuing a permit and evaluating the build out and fit up of this facility as that process moved forward. We can go to the next slide, thanks. Utilize when we get a set of plans like that was just on the screen, we'll also get cut sheets for pieces of equipment that will be within that facility. This is an example of a hood for ventilation that is utilized in the industry, and it removes harmful vapors from an environment to reduce the risk. And we'll get, in some projects, we'll get one of these for every single piece of equipment that is within that facility to evaluate. Go ahead, thanks. And I wanted to show some bad because this is the other side of that. And on the right-hand side, or actually on the left-hand side, you'll see there's probably thousands upon thousands of butane cans that were utilized to extract cannabis, used in the extraction process for cannabis. And it did not end well. In this case, there you'll see the firefighters. They're putting out some hot spots of the remaining structure, whatever is left. But the products were being utilized in a confined space. They found an ignition source, and there was a rapid expansion of the products when they combusted, creating the explosion. And you'll actually can see some framing parts still standing, but all the sheathing has been removed. So this is why we make sure that we have a safe environment, we have a safe process, we have safe disposal of products, we have designed items, and we have specific operational use of that equipment. On the right-hand side picture, you'll see that there's, this is the same type of system. I believe this is set up to utilize propane. and they will recover the propane and use vacuum pumps to separate the propane from the product they're looking to collect. And all of those processes are, you're taking a flammable product, that's a liquid, you're turning it into a vapor, then you're turning it back into a liquid, and you're trying to capture it and remove a product all in that same process, which absolutely can be extremely hazardous. The amount of hazards, vapors, even static electricity create a very significant risk in these types of environments. So we don't want to see this. What we would like to see is a safe industry utilizing safe practices, and a safe environment for employees. On the bottom left-hand side, this is actually in somebody's home, and those are each 100-pound cylinders. And propane weighs a little bit more than 4 pounds per gallon. So there's a whole lot of product within that space. I think I count 5 100-pound cylinders of propane. It's extremely dangerous, and you'll see that there's some vacuum pumps to assist in what they hope is the recovery process of that product after it's put through its cycle. On the left-hand side, we're going to talk about some grow items again. This is an existing home, and somebody needed some additional circuits. So somebody added a sub panel to the main panel. But you'll see with the covers off that there's quite a bit of risk going on here. This picture is a really good example of something that we shouldn't see within any facility. And on the left-hand side, first of all, all electrical panels should have covers. All electrical boxes should have covers. All electrical receptacles should have covers. We shouldn't see splices outside of a box in any scenario. And believe it or not, there's actually an electrical code that says all electrical work shall be completed in a neat and orderly-like fashion, workman-like manner, is the term. So there's a lot going on here. If your electrical system is part of your evaluation, which it should be, having a licensed electrician evaluate your uses for what you're planning is very important. The picture on the left is a really good example because a residential house is not designed to have the amount of circuits that are required for some grows that could be in those facilities. If your house only has a 100-amp service and your one grow room pulls 100 amps from your house, well, as soon as you plug your TV in, you've drawn more power than that system's really designed for. And it's something that you should evaluate to make sure that you have enough power for your facility. Let's talk about what happens if you don't. If you start drawing more current or power from your electrical system than it's designed for, the products within it break down. The receptacle will break down, the wiring can break down, the electrical panel can actually break down as you're drawing more product from it than it's designed. Circuit breakers can even break down if too much power is drawn through them for too long of a period of time. They will degrade. And all of these items can be prevented, and they will cost you less money over time. Having to replace or expand your electrical system to add more receptacles is a lot cheaper than having to replace your service for your house or your electrical panel, which could degrade and become damaged in a short amount of time. Proper disposal on the right-hand side picture, we have a picture of inappropriate disposal of products within a building. And, you know, this may be somebody's garage or it could be an outbuilding, but what it creates is an environment where you're piling up a bunch of combustible materials that really shouldn't be piled up. The plastics are considered flammable, and when they do combust and burn, they produce a lot of unburned products of combustion that are very dangerous to you, poisonous gases, to be simple. And having a very large pile of them creates additional risks and hazards. And having them all spaced out in a pile like this creates voids in between each one. So if there was a fire in this location, it could spread very quickly and very rapidly. But if you have an environment that looks like this, something else that is a risk is you'll see that there's a doorway into an adjacent space behind that picture. If that's my means of egress to get out of that space, and I'm adding that risk to that space, if there's an emergency and I can't see very well or there's some smoke, all of that product's going to delay my exiting from that building. So evaluating your path of travel all the way to the outside of your building is a really good idea. Making sure that all of your exits are clear, unobstructed, and maintained that way should be an item on everyone's list, no matter the scale of your operation. The next, excuse me, the next couple slides are just going to be high level items and they're a little bit more in depth and educational. Mold, like we've talked about, are significant concerns is the treatment of mold and the creation of mold. We don't want to create environments that help with mold growth, and having higher humidity, sealing rooms up so that there's no ventilation, and not removing some of those environmental factors that allow mold to grow are really important items, but they should be done in a safe way with the proper equipment, proper fans, proper dehumidification is really high level items that are easy to fix. But on top of that, utilizing chemicals to remediate mold does create risks and hazards. So if you are utilizing products to sanitize rooms between your grows, making sure that you mark and label those and only use appropriate and approved products is a really good safety message, and mandated by a lot of different laws. Sensitizers and allergens. I speak of this as I'm slightly choking, so I apologize because my allergies have been kicking up really heavily with all of the pollen that's being released right now at this time of year. Um, but some things that you should definitely keep aware of is if you are having any signs or symptoms like itchy skin, hives, swollenness, irritated eyes, it may be a cause from something that you're utilizing within your environment or even in your house in some of your cases. Introducing those things that are not normally there and not normally part of your life can create hazards for you, your family, your pets. um, so evaluating those items is really, really important to alleviate any of those issues. Carbon dioxide is used a lot in the industry in a lot of different ways, and it was new to me about 7 years ago. I had to do a ton of research on how it was used and why it was used. But we use carbon dioxide for extraction process to separate portions of a plant. We utilize carbon dioxide to help the plant grow in certain stages of its life. We use carbon dioxide under very, very high pressures to facilitate extraction. But some risks associated with carbon dioxide is it's an asphyxiant. It can displace the oxygen that you or I need to breathe. So having proper detection if you're going to utilize carbon dioxide within your spaces is a really easy and important item to have in place. They do have monitoring devices that can be installed, and they're relatively inexpensive. And they do add an additional level of safety if you're using carbon dioxide in any of your processes. Carbon monoxide. This one kind of goes with the carbon dioxide because unfortunately they can be found together. If you're burning a product of, if you are burning a hydrocarbon to create carbon dioxide, you will also create carbon monoxide. If you lose power at your house and you're utilizing a generator to keep your plants alive, you are creating carbon monoxide. So there's a lot of different areas that carbon monoxide can be a significant risk within this industry and your everyday life. So utilizing generators well outside of your home and in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions is a very important item. You'll see our safety messages go out every time that there's a storm. We encourage everybody to not put generators in your garages and to keep them in free moving air to keep that environment safe. But on top of that, adding heat sources to, say, a grow room that are unvented fuel burning appliances is not a good idea. In buildings that the Division of Fire Safety retains jurisdiction over, we actually prohibit all unvented fuel burning appliances within the state because it does add a significant amount of risk. And every time that we burn a fuel, we do create carbon monoxide. Um, at some level, we create carbon monoxide. So, evaluating your processes, your safety plans, what will you do if you lose power? Having those plans now will help reduce the risk in the future so that you're not trying to make something work. If you have a plan for it, you won't have to invent something. Thank you. Indoor air quality. This kind of goes with the other slides that we've talked about, but utilizing proper PPE if you are utilizing chemicals within a space is a very important item. Having proper skin covering is also an important item. All of these safety precautions can be found on the SDS sheets that I mentioned earlier, but almost actually every container that requires safety precautions will actually have it on the label of the product itself. So reading the manufacturer's directions, use, applications, and safety equipment on the products that you're utilizing is very important. We're gonna cover pesticides the same way. It's really important to have some signage to know to utilize products that are approved for use and to have that documentation in case there is an emergency and you need some assistance. So having that SDS sheet, if you have any pesticides at your location, whether it's part of your cannabis process or not, is a really important item. We've talked about this earlier in our slide presentation, so we can continue. Um, a lot of people don't understand that things that the plant needs to grow can actually degrade other things within your home. So if you see copper pipes turning colors like blue or green, it's probably because there's been a reaction with the products that you're introducing to the environment to help your plant grow. And some of those products can actually degrade your piping in your home, your walls, your flooring materials, because there's a lot of composite materials available on the market. So making sure that you're using products in accordance with the manufacturer's directions. Like if it says this product can only be utilized outside, you should probably only use it outside. It doesn't mean reduce the amount or utilize it outside of the manufacturer's directions. Any use of any product or piece of equipment outside of the manufacturer's directions should only be approved by that manufacturer of that product. So if a very nice nutrient says you should only use this product outside in the directions that you have, you can reach out to the company to say, is there an approved way for me to utilize this product within my building on an inside use, as an example. Compressed gases. Compressed gases are highly restricted in public buildings that the Division of Fire Safety has jurisdiction over. Depending on what the product is, there will be limitations on the amount that can be within certain types of buildings. But any cylinders or compressed gases should always be secured in the upright position with all of their safety equipment on and in place. The larger tanks that you've seen in some earlier pictures, not the white ones, but the green ones, they actually have a safety shroud that goes over the valving on the top of it. So when it's not in use, it has an additional level of safety. And believe it or not, even the propane tanks that were really in a bad location in our earlier slide, they have a safety mechanism built into the tops of those to keep the valving safe also. But it's designed to be in its upright position and it should be secured in an appropriate location so that it can't fall over. Electrical, we've talked about electrical quite a bit today, everything from fixtures to the services on our houses to evaluate how we're utilizing pieces of equipment and evaluating our electrical systems in our homes to make sure that they're sized appropriately for our use in this industry as a whole. I say homes, but I mean any type of license that you may have in any type of situation. You should always utilize items as they were designed. And having an electrician come to evaluate your electrical system to make sure that you're not straining it or using it in a way that is going to be more hazardous and degrade your system is a really simple item, and I highly encourage it. Lighting, we've seen a lot of different lighting examples today of what we shouldn't see, but utilizing lighting in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions is the safest item to reduce risk that I can say. But understanding that there's a lot of light fixtures that are still out in our environment that have dangerous products within them. So you'll see some examples that are highlighted here, like lead, cadmium, mercury. Um, they're toxins for us at very small amounts. They can be hazardous to humans. And obviously, anything that's hazardous to an adult is more hazardous to a child or an animal. So we want to have safe disposal of any light bulbs that we have. As an example, you'll see in bold, there's fluorescent light bulbs. You should not take them outside and smash them. You should appropriately dispose of them because they do have hazardous products within them. And believe it or not, to clean that hazardous product up once it's in the environment is very, very difficult and it's extremely costly. So disposing of the bulbs appropriately, like anything in this industry, is very important to keep everyone safe. Thank you. Extraction equipment we've talked about a lot, and it is a very small component, but utilizing equipment and evaluating your operations, not adding additional equipment outside of what you're permitted to use, are all really important items. And only utilizing chemicals and products that are allowed to be utilized within the Cannabis Control Board's control and approval. Some other physical hazards. These are from a national study, believe it or not, but flammable and combustible liquids, workplace violence, walking surfaces, working at heights and elevations, the amount of noise that's created in some of the environments, not being prepared for emergencies and not have proper planning, powered industrial trucks, moving equipment, or getting yourself set up. Machines and hand tools and confined spaces are all some physical hazards associated with the cannabis industry as a whole. Um, and things that you can utilize to evaluate your process, your setup, and keep your industry safe. Um, there are a lot of codes and standards that are being developed at the national and international level to help keep this industry safe. Um, it's the intent of codes and standards is not to overregulate. It's to kind of find a baseline of where a safe operation is, and it's driven by the industry itself, believe it or not. So NFPA that you see in front of you today is the National Fire Protection Association. This standard is actually developed from the cannabis industry. The cannabis industry have input. The professionals that work within the industry and develop your products have input. And the enforcement side, or the educational and enforcement side of the industry, also get to have a say in the way these are developed. But if we go to the next slide, you're going to see that there is a development of a brand new standard, and it will be dedicated to this subject matter in the future. One more slide. And it's NFPA 420 is what it will be called. And it is in development. And it should be coming out of development and either absorbed into one of the other core codes, or it could be a standalone document. But in the future, there will be a lot some additional guidance to help guide this industry to safe uses. That that is going to be my last slide for today. And I think that that brings us just enough time for some questions.
Thanks so much, Landon. If anyone has questions, you can, I guess, pop them into the chat or always raise your hand as well.
So I do have two questions, and they have to do with renewing of licenses. And because I work in with the Cannabis Control Board, and I will answer those questions. If you haven't changed any of your processes, you haven't changed any of your equipment, you haven't changed any of your, say, your tier of your license, then you do not need a new non-jurisdictional letter from the Division of Fire Safety. And if you are a public building and you haven't changed anything, then you don't need a new conditional occupancy or an occupancy certificate, that's what we're shooting for everyone. But if you make changes in, say you're a non-public building and you've made changes in your tier of your license, that would facilitate a requirement for you to be reevaluated. And the process is typically the same. You'll send me an email or give me a phone call, and I'll give you my email address. I'll send you back statute and some directions. We'll evaluate what changes that you've made, and we'll either issue you a new non-jurisdictional letter, or we'll guide you through how to become a public building. And to become a public building, it's really driven by a document being submitted to the Division of Fire Safety, letting us know what you want to do, scheduling an inspection, or having a plan review completed. If you're a public building and you're changing your process or adding processes, say you have a tier 2 grow and you would like to add manufacturing to that, and get an additional license, you're changing the use within your building. So that would require an additional inspection and an evaluation of that space that's going to be utilized in that public building. So that really, if you're the same and you're not changing anything, then your status quo is you have an occupancy certificate that you get to utilize for your renewal. And if you're a non-public building and you haven't changed anything, then you wouldn't have to get a new non-jurisdictional letter from us. Some big items that I have seen come through over the last year, or last couple of months, as people are going through renewals, are if you change your address, you have to go through the process again, because it's a different building, it's a different location. And part of our process is to evaluate whether the building is a public building or a non-public building. So if it's a new building, we need to do that evaluation. If you do reach out to me, and you know that you've made a change, and that is what's prompting the licensing specialist from the Cannabis Control Board to tell you to get in touch with me, if you can let me know what that change is up front, it does help me evaluate and move our process along quickly. My process I tell every single person that it takes about 10 business days, because this process is a portion of my responsibilities. But my turnaround time is about 10 business days. My average is a lot faster than that, but I don't, my standing goal is to have them all turned around within 10 days. If you were doing a brand new, very large commercial structure, our permitting process is about 30 days. That's to complete a plan review, to issue a permit, and to assign a fire marshal to that build out. And one last item that I do want to talk about is if you are going from a non-public building to a public building, your first step is to go to the Division of Fire Safety's website. You can go under our permits, applications, and forms. And if you're not doing any building changes or fit ups, you can file a change of use, change of ownership inspection request form that would be assigned to a fire marshal. They'll reach out to you and schedule an inspection. So that transition can happen that way. If you're going to do a fit up of a space, or do construction, then we would ask you to do a construction permit, and that process would happen the same way. Any additional questions on occupancy certificates or non-jurisdictional letters? Wonderful. I can't believe I've answered every question. If for all of the individuals that are on the Teams meeting and that will see this in the future, if you have questions, you know that I answer the phone and I do respond to phone calls and emails. I try to get back to everybody within 24 to 72 hours. So if you do send me something, please understand that I will get back to you and I haven't deleted it. But thank you all for your time. If there's no questions.
I think we'll call it there. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Have a good day.